year ago, my biggest project was an app launch. Today, it's this half-acre. You see, I didn't just leave the city to start a homestead. I kept my demanding 9-to-5 tech job. I was chasing a simpler life, but what I found is that homesteading never ever stops. So in this video, I'm breaking down my 5 huge lessons I learned from my first year of homesteading, from juggling code and ducks, and showing you how you can do it too. If you're anything like I was, your screen time is off the charts. My journey started small, trying to get a taste of life when my food came from the soil instead of shrink-wrapped packaging. And that small taste fueled a bigger dream. For years, I would scroll through images of gorgeous gardens on Instagram, imagining a life beyond a few pots and a concrete patio. But I'm a realist. I've got a career in tech that I actually enjoy and pays the bills. So quitting wasn't an option, so the dream always felt out of reach. But that container garden changed something. When it came time to buy our first home, the main thing that we were looking for was land. The house was second to that. Then we found this place, a beautiful house with a predominantly manicured lawn. But all I saw was the potential of what it could be. The land space, the growing, the duck enclosure, and just far enough from the city to actually be able to see the stars. So I made the jump. I traded a city patio for a half-acre of possibility. Everyone thought I was crazy, and I guess the first year sort of proved that they were partly right. It was harder, messier, and way more overwhelming than I imagined, but it was also more rewarding. I didn't find a simpler life, but in some ways I found a fuller one. Along the way, I learned 5 big lessons I really wish someone had told me before I started. The first and most important lesson is that homesteading is not a hobby. It never ends. It's a lifestyle with a relentless rhythm. It doesn't punch in a clock. The work is never ever done. In my old life, my day was ruled by a digital calendar. Meetings from 9 to 5, close the laptop, and my time was mine. On a homestead, the calendar is the sun, the seasons, and the needs of living things. I had this romantic idea of waking up with the birds, peacefully tending my land for an hour, and then settling down at my laptop with a fresh cup of mint tea. The reality is a 6 a.m. alarm, not to peacefully garden, but to frantically throw a frost blanket over my tomatoes because there is a freak frost coming in. Is realizing at lunch that the ducks have once again drenched their entire enclosure, splashed their pool empty, so I'm running outside to make sure they've got enough water and they don't dehydrate. It's then ending my workday, and instead of zoning out on the sofa, heading straight out to spend 2 hours weeding a patch that just seems to have erupted overnight. And then weekends aren't for brunch anymore. They're for the big projects, like trying to extend your duck pen to include chickens, turning compost, amending soil, planning for the next season. It's a constant state of troubleshooting and adapting because nature doesn't care about your plans. The weeds don't take holidays, and the weather will always be the unpredictable boss that rules everything. Now, this isn't meant to scare you, it's just a reality check. Accepting the continuous nature of the work is a key step to preventing burnout. And I didn't always get the balance right. So you have to find joy not in it being done, but in the process itself. Now, when I first stood on this half-acre, my ambition was out of control. I pictured a mini orchard over here, a 30-foot veg patch over there, and chuck a polytunnel in the middle too. The duck house, a compost system, a berry bush over here. It was just so elaborate, and it's great to have those dreams, but start small, please. Because in my first spring, I tried to do it all. Up went the polytunnel. In went all the no-dig beds. I ordered 5 dwarf fruit trees. Oh, and chuck in 2 different compost bays to match. And I wouldn't say I failed, but I burned out spectacularly. I underestimated the weeding time. I didn't plan for the ridiculously hot spring that we had in the UK. I didn't plan for pest control with the numerous amounts of aphids that were suddenly attacking absolutely everything. It was a lot. So my second biggest lesson is to start even smaller than you think is reasonable. Then cut that plan in half. It's so much easier to manage 1 4 by 8 foot bed and do that really, really well and know how your garden works. I mean, I just moved into this house, and whilst I had an idea of the direction the sun moved in and what would get the most light, it was a lot to manage all up here. Now, whilst I wouldn't say live on your land for a full year before doing anything, start small, because that one bed can teach you a whole wealth of information to see what you can troubleshoot and correct before being halfway through the season and being like, oh my gosh, what have I done? There's so much benefit in understanding the quirks of your own space. And if I could do it over, I'd actually start with just a few containers and grow bags and work it out from there. They're flexible, they're cheap, and they would have let me learn the patterns of my environment without the back-breaking work or the expensive commitment. It's easy to add more the next year, but it can be heartbreaking and costly to undo mistakes. Now, this was the lesson that my inner tech nerd fought the hardest. I wanted to escape the world of spreadsheets and Gantt charts and just live off the land and just garden intuitively. But the reality is, when you are gardening at a larger scale, that stuff is your best friend. The irony is, the single most valuable tool that helps me balance my 9 to 5 with my 5 to 9 was spreadsheets. Homesteading can be this fire hose of information and tasks. What did I plant here? What should I plant here? What's a good companion plant for that? When did I start my tomato seeds? How much did I spend on duck feed last month? Did I remember to order cover crops? At first, I tried to keep all of that in my head, and that lasted about 2 seasons. Now my garden planner is my second brain, and it's not too complicated. I have different tabs for different things. So, like the garden plan. I've also used apps to manage this too, which can be really helpful for laying out the information and structuring my beds and seeing them visually. But logging what's planted where helps me avoid planting the same family in the same spot next year, which can deplete soil and encourage disease. Also, seed starting, a schedule of dates of what to sow when, is really helpful. Things like starting seeds indoors and then hardening them off is something I manage based on my local frost dates. Key one, budget. A simple tracker just to know what I'm spending where has been an absolute game changer. From seeds to soil amendments to coop materials. This has been a huge eye-opener. Just seeing what is being spent where helps me prioritize essential purchases versus nice to haves. Then also something like a minimal harvest log. That's been really great. Like being able to see that in one go I've harvested 4.7 kilograms of tomatoes is a huge motivator. Comparing that to then what I've spent on the seeds, materials versus then what I'm spending in the supermarket, it's just mind-blowing to me. It also helps me plan for next year to see what was productive and what wasn't worth the space. Creating these systems is what makes this lifestyle feel possible when you have a full-time job. Automating your thinking by putting it on paper is what frees up your mind to actually do the tasks. So honestly, I would say don't fight your skills, leverage them. In my tech job, if there's a problem, a bug in the code, I can work late, I can drink more coffee. There's almost always a direct line between effort and outcome. Homesteading taught me a very humbling lesson. Nature doesn't always operate that way. You can do everything right and still have a flop. For example, I spent months babying broccoli and cabbage seedlings, hardening them from their start in the polytunnel to then putting them in the ground. Planted on a beautiful spring day, a week later I come back and overnight they've been munched. Each one eaten down into tiny little nubs. Cabbage webs had descended like a tiny green army overnight and just rinsed through them. I then also had a major project deadline at work that week, so the collision of those two worlds just felt like a lot. And it wasn't just plants. In that same week, we lost our beloved barn cat Billy and our duck Ming Ming. It was a heartbreaking lesson that sometimes, despite your best interests and care, nature sometimes has a harsher, more brutal lesson. So in that moment, you have two choices. You can either give up, pack it all up, decide to sell the house and forget it ever happened, or you can learn from it. I learned about stakes and floating row covers for bug protection. I learned even better to identify white cabbage moths, checking more frequently for egg. The thing is, perceived failure is the tuition in the school of homesteading. And it's not personal, it's data. Pests, disease, freak hailstorms, or a week of scorching heat. These things happen, but it's what you learn from them, how you recover and how you better prepare for next time. Because from what I've found, your perfectly timed schedule for planting will be thrown into chaos. The weather doesn't listen to anyone, especially not in the UK. So this is where a mindset shift is crucial. You have to detach your ego from the outcome. Instead of seeing a failed crop as a personal failure, you have to see it as a data point for next season's experiment. For example, some vegetables you can get away with sowing in spring and in summer. If you do the exact same thing as what you did in spring, it could work or it could flop horribly. So you've got to take the data that you've learnt there and tweak it to the environment you're working with at the time. And in some ways, that's actually a lesson that's made me better at my day job. It's taught me flexibility, resilience, and the wisdom to focus on what I can control versus what I can't. For a long time, I focused on the destination, a thriving garden, endless fruits and veggies, a pantry full of canned goods, a life of total self-sufficiency. And I was so fixated on the outcome that I was burning myself out on the journey. I'd look at my half-finished projects and just feel like I was a failure, instead of taking pride in what I'd already accomplished. The final and maybe biggest lesson of this year is that The true reward isn't in the harvest, it's in the harvesting. It's not the perfectly weeded garden, it's the meditative act of weeding, especially after a long day of staring at a screen. It's the simple pleasure of walking outside after work, going to the polytunnel and picking a handful of sun-gold tomatoes to chuck into your dinner. And those tomatoes taste better than any you can buy, not because they're fresh, but because they're made of the soil, the work, the effort that you've put into making that garden happen. I'm finding that this life isn't about reaching this euphoric state of perfection. It's about the small daily acts of connection. Like watching a bee visit a squash blossom and knowing that you're part of this vital ecosystem. The joy of watching ducks forage and play and splash about, knowing that you'll have to herd them back into their pen later. Or the quiet comfort of watching your new indoor cat curled up on the sofa and feeling safer than ever. It's learning to ask for help when you need it, and also knowing that you can't do it all at once. And realizing that the dream of homesteading isn't the finish line, it's a path. And the joy is found by walking it day by day, season by season, even whilst you're juggling it with everything else at once. So was that first year of juggling code and ducks crazy? Yes it was. Was it worth it? Without a doubt. Even with the failures, even with all the stress and the endless work, this homestead has grounded me in ways that I can't believe. It has taught me more about the rhythms of nature, the environment, patience, resilience than I could ever learn from behind a screen. You can absolutely build this life even with a demanding job. You just have to start small and work from there. Work out what's possible for you, because that will look different for each and every person. Be smart with your systems, embrace the failures, and most importantly, find joy in the work itself. It's about finding balance with where you're at right now. If I had said to myself, I'm never going to go to another supermarket or eat another bit of fast food ever again, I feel like my job, my life, and everything, especially when starting to build this homestead, would have been so much harder. If you're on a similar journey or just dreaming about it, I'm sharing everything I'm learning along the way. The wins, the flops, the spreadsheets in between. Hit that subscribe button to follow along. And I'd love to hear from you. What's the thing holding you back from starting? I'm not talking about starting a homestead, but starting with a container, a pot, or even on your windowsill. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you soon.